You're listening to the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.
We're going to close off all the discussions about buying and selling with buying and selling land. And the Mishnah is interested in how we measure the land. How are we going to measure? Now, the first Mishnah in the chapter, which we've looked at, dealt with land which has got stuff in it. So if there are crevasses or crevices, if there are stones, well, how big do they have to be included? That's the first question that the Mishnah addressed. The second one is actually, how exactly do we have to measure it? Because measurement of land is, it's even today, it's technically complicated. You need to employ a surveyor. That's why you employ a surveyor, to measure how much land there is. Even when selling a house, there are discussions about, what area do you count? Do you count the space in the attic? And the Mishnah is going to continue. I sell you a kur's space of soil. That's the space of soil that is required to sow a kur's worth of seed. And by the way, I popped a little on the source sheet. I've just popped a little table just to show you what this is. So a beit kur, a kur's worth is 180 cubs. It's basically 75,000 square amot. Maybe that's not so easy to get round in our minds, but it's 20,000 square yards. So think about it. So it's a big piece of land, 20,000 square yards. A beit kav is about just over 100 square yards, 10 by 10. A beit seah is nearly 700 square yards. Those are the kind of dimensions we're talking about. So someone is going to say, I'm going to sell you a beit kur. Beit kur afar ani mocher. I'm selling you a beit kur. That's 20,000 square yards. So it's a big piece. It's a big piece of land. Midah v'chevel. And I'm going to measure it with a rope. I'm going to take a tape measure, a rope measure, and I'm going to measure it out for you. In other words, I am selling you that precise quantity of land. And at that point, he's taking on an obligation. If he gave him anything less, he deducts. That is, the buyer can deduct from the price. And if he gave him anything more, then he returns, i.e. the buyer has to return some of the money. So in other words, given he said that this sale is going to be by a precise measure, if the amount of land handed over is marginally different from what is promised, then we're going to essentially even up the purchase price by taking more money or giving back some money if necessary. But Im amarlo, im chasar, im yater. If he said more or less, we'll see this expression again and again actually in this chapter. Im chaser, im yater. More or less. If there's a bit more, if there's a bit less. In other words, I'm selling you sort of a kur's worth of land, but a kur's area of land, but kind of more or less. I'm not being precise about it. Afilu pachat rov al asea or hotir rov al asea higio. If he says, I'm just going to sell you more or less a kur's worth of land, then even if he gave him a quarter kav per seah less, or a quarter kav per seah more, the sale's a valid sale. It's a valid sale. Yoter miken ya'aseh cheshbon. More than this, he makes a calculation. So in other words, we seem to be saying that if I say, more or less, I've got discretion up to a quarter kav per seah. Well, what is that in practice? Well, there are 6 kavs in a seah. We've got the table on the source sheet. So a quarter kav per seah is kind of 1 in 24, basically. It's 1 in 24. It's a quarter in 6 covs, 1 in 24. I would say that's about, gosh, in percentage terms, that's about 4%. So that's about 4%. 4%, 1/24. If we're more than 4% off, we make a calculation. If we're less than 4% off, we say, oh yeah, well, that sort of goes with the territory. And interestingly, we've learned in terms of ordinary financial transactions, we've learned that overcharging is defined by a sixth, which is 17%. So we are being more precise with matters of land than we are if you go into the market and buy a bottle or a jug or some oil. Yeah, overcharging in the marketplace is 16%. It seems that even if you say more or less, even if you express a little bit of doubt in the measure, you only have discretion up to 1/24, up to about 4%. So what are we going to do then? Let's say we do this calculation and it turns out that the area is wrong. What are we going to do? Mahu mahzir lo. What does he give him back? I.e., if the air is too much, the buyer will give back. If the air is too little, the seller will give back. What does he give him back? Mahu mahzir lo. And the Mishnah answers ma'ot, money, or literally coins. We're going to give him back coins. We're not going to give the seller back land. Although the Mishnah makes the provision, imratsa machazir lo karka. If he wanted, we will give him back land. So the seller seems to have an option. And the Mishnah recognizes the power of this option. Velama amru machazir lo ma'ot. Why did it say, oh, we give him back money? Because we want to enhance the power of the seller. And why might we want to do this? Well, the Mishnah is going to paint a picture where there might be a tiny quantity of land. And we've already been discussing access rights, by the way. But if you're a seller and you're selling a field, and you can just imagine, well, if the price turned out to be incorrect and you receive back a tiny quantity of land at the edge of it, well, do you want a tiny quantity of land? How are you going to get to it? Maybe you don't have access to it. If you're the seller, you don't own the land anymore around here, you might rather have the money. And this is what the Mishnah seems to elucidate. So, leyapot kocho shel hamocher, to enhance the power of the seller, she'im shier basadeh beit tisha kabim, maybe there would remain in the field 9 kavs space. And I think the field we're talking about is a beit kur. So we're still talking about the beit kur that we began with. And we're saying, oh yeah, there might remain 9 kavs space. Let's just have a look at our volume table. There are 180 kavs in a kur. So if we're out by 9 kavs, that's 1/20th. I think what the Mishnah is getting at here is that the critical level for adjusting the price is being off by 1/24th. If we're off by 1/24th, we need to make amends. So the 9 kav out of 180, well, that's 1/20th. So that's over the critical level. It's over the critical level, but it's only 9 kavs. It's about 7. It's about 1,000 square. It's about 1,000 square yards. So it's a space of about 30 by 30. 30 by 30 yards. It's not a giant space. In terms of a field, in terms of agriculture, it's not a giant space. So maybe they'll just be in the field 9 kabim. And by the way, we're going to use different measures for a garden. A garden is smaller. So uvagina beit chatzi kav. In a garden, half a kav. because the basic area of a garden is less, and so the 1/20th will be less. Divrei Rabbi Akiva Beit Rova. According to Rabbi Akiva, a quarter cup space. Rabbi Akiva has a smaller definition of a garden than the rest of the sages. Machazir lo et hakarka. The buyer must give him back land. I.e., if we didn't have this rule that the buyer had to give back money, the buyer would be giving him back land, and the seller doesn't want the land. And then the Mishnah concludes, Lo et harova bilvad hu machazir lo et kol ha-mutar. And not only does he just give back the quarter cuv's space, the quarter cuv's land, but all of the surplus. So we've said, for example, that if we're out by a quarter cuv per sale, i.e. 1/24th, we make a calculation. But he has to give back all of the surplus. So in other words, if he's out by, I don't know, half a cuv per sale, we're not just going to give back the amount over a quarter. We're going to give back all of the surplus. In other words, if we do need to recalculate the price of this land, we're going to recalculate for the whole area, and we're going to perform the necessary balancing transaction in order to make it fair.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Daily Mishnah Podcast with Benedict.